In the far reaches of the galaxy, far away from the busy trade routes and shining core worlds, there was a small colony struggling to survive. It was a place where life was harsh, resources were limited, and the shadow of danger always hung above the people. The colony was not powerful or famous. It was just one of many small settlements scattered across the stars, trying to build a life far from war and chaos. For the colonists, each day was a battle to grow food, repair machines, and protect their families from whatever threats lurked in the darkness of space. They had no great armies, no powerful fleets, and no allies strong enough to defend them. All they had was hope that their existence would remain unnoticed by raiders and predators who roamed the void. But hope can be fragile. One day, that hope shattered when an unknown fleet appeared on their sensors. These were not friendly ships, not traders or explorers, but raiders who came with hunger and cruelty in their hearts. The colonists tried to hide, tried to send messages to nearby systems for help, but no one came. Their world was too far, too isolated, and too unimportant in the eyes of others. For many, it seemed as if their fate was sealed. Yet desperation is a powerful force, and desperation pushed them to try one last thing. They had an old emergency beacon, a device meant to send signals across vast distances, far beyond what their normal communications could reach. No one really believed it would work, but with nothing left to lose, they activated it. The signal carried a simple message: "Help us, we are under attack, we cannot survive alone." They did not expect an answer. In truth, they believed the message would be lost in the endless ocean of stars, swallowed by the silence of space. They thought perhaps some distant listener would hear it centuries later, long after their colony had turned to ashes. The signal was not meant for humanity. The colonists hardly even considered Earth when they activated the beacon. In their minds, humans were too far away, a young species that had only recently begun to explore the galaxy. The great powers, ancient civilizations with vast empires, were the ones who usually answered or ignored such calls. And in most cases, ignored was more likely. To the colonists, the signal was a scream into the void, a final prayer spoken by people with no hope. Yet space is strange, and sometimes messages travel farther than anyone expects. This desperate cry, carried by invisible waves, passed through the stars, drifting across empty systems and lifeless worlds, until at last it reached a place no one had imagined: Earth. Deep space receivers, powerful antennas that scanned the heavens day and night, caught the faint signal. At first, the technicians who worked there thought it was some kind of interference, another piece of cosmic noise. But when they cleaned the transmission and played it back, the words became clear. It was not noise. It was a cry for help. The moment the message was understood, it spread quickly across Earth. Scientists studied it, military leaders debated it, politicians argued over it. But above all the noise, one truth stood out. People were in danger, and their call had reached humanity. And humanity was not the same species it had been centuries before. The scars of Earth's history were deep and unforgettable. Wars, poverty, and disasters had once torn the planet apart, teaching painful lessons about cruelty, survival, and the cost of indifference. Generations of struggle had carved a vow into the heart of humanity. Never again would they ignore the suffering of others. So when the message was heard, Earth did not turn away. They remembered their own past, their own cries that had once gone unanswered, and they knew they could not repeat those mistakes. Leaders stood before their people and declared that no call for help would go unanswered, no matter how far, no matter how dangerous. The people agreed because they too remembered the old wounds. They knew what it felt like to be small, weak, and alone. In that moment, something fierce awakened in them. The cry from the colony was more than just a signal. It was a reminder of what humanity had promised to become. Where others saw a distant problem, humanity saw a duty. Where others turned their backs, humanity prepared to rise. Across the planet, engineers began readying ships. Soldiers volunteered for service, and families said goodbye to loved ones who would leave to fight among the stars. The decision was not easy, but it was simple. Humanity, scarred by its history, had become a species that refused silence. They knew that to ignore the signal was to betray themselves, to betray the lessons written in their own blood. The colony had sent a desperate cry, not expecting anyone to listen. But Earth listened. Earth heard, and Earth would answer. The colony had always heard stories about Earth. To them, humanity was still young, still climbing its way into the stars. They knew humans had only recently begun to expand beyond their solar system. building colonies of their own and sending ships into deeper space. Because of this, the colonists never truly believed that humans could play any role in saving them. Earth was too far, their fleets too small, their experience too little. In the eyes of those desperate settlers, if anyone answered their call, it would be the great alien powers nearby, not a species that had only just begun to leave its homeworld. So when the emergency signal was sent, no one in the colony whispered the name of Earth. They thought of the closer empires, the great unions of alien races, or perhaps even the mercenaries who roamed between star systems. Humanity in their minds was too distant, too primitive, and too cautious to interfere. To call for help from Earth would be like asking a farmer to stop a war, well-meaning perhaps, but powerless to make any real difference. That belief gave them little comfort, but it made their despair easier to carry. If no help was possible, then at least there would be no disappointment when none arrived. Around them, in neighboring star systems, the alien factions reacted with amusement when they heard whispers of the human response. To those older civilizations, humanity was still a child race, a collection of deathworlders who had barely mastered survival on their violent home planet. They remembered how humans had once struggled with their own wars and disasters. They remembered how humans had often been seen as reckless, unstable, and dangerous even to themselves. To the alien factions, such a people would never risk their fragile fleets for strangers. Some alien leaders even laughed at the thought. Why would humans, who still struggled to hold their own colonies together, send ships across the void to save a group of foreigners? Why would they waste resources, risk lives, and face unknown enemies for people who offered them nothing in return? It seemed foolish, impossible, and utterly unlike the cautious strategies of the galaxy's major powers. Most assumed that, at best, the humans would send a message of sympathy, perhaps a token promise of aid that would never arrive in time. At worst, they would ignore it entirely. But what the colony and the alien factions failed to understand was that humanity had been shaped by a history unlike any other. Earth was not an easy world. It was a place of storms, earthquakes, predators, and endless conflict. For thousands of years, humans had fought not only nature but also each other. They had learned to survive in deserts, jungles, ice fields, and oceans filled with danger. Every step of their evolution had been forged in hardship. This background gave them a spirit that was both stubborn and unyielding. To outsiders, it often looked reckless, but to humans, it was survival. When the distress call reached Earth, it did not land on cautious ears. It landed on a people who remembered what it was like to cry out and be ignored. Humanity remembered times when no one came to help them. They remembered wars where entire nations were left alone to burn, disasters where cities screamed for aid that never arrived. Those scars had not been forgotten, and they had shaped humanity's promise to themselves. Never again. That was the miscalculation. The aliens believed humans were too cautious, but they had misunderstood the difference between caution and determination. Humans did not rush blindly into battles, but when they chose to act, they acted with everything they had. They believed humans were too primitive, but they did not realize that humanity's so-called primitiveness was exactly what gave them strength. The ability to fight against overwhelming odds, to adapt quickly, and to endure what others could not. They thought humans were too distant, but to humanity, distance was no barrier when lives were at stake. When the call for help spread across Earth, it awakened something deep in the Deathworlders. Soldiers who had once retired volunteered to serve again. Families who had never left their homeworld supported the mission, sending supplies and prayers. Engineers worked day and night to ready ships for battle. Ordinary citizens watched the news and whispered to each other with pride that their species would not remain silent. The call for help had lit a fire in humanity's heart, a fire that no alien faction had expected. Alien spies who watched Earth reported in disbelief as fleets were assembled. They described the strange unity of humans, how their governments, often known for disagreements and rivalries, came together for a single purpose. They could not understand why humans would care so much about a distant colony of strangers. What gain could there be? What resource, what prize could possibly be worth such effort? To the older civilizations, everything was measured in profit and loss, in the cold balance of politics. They did not see what humans saw, that a cry for help was reason enough. The miscalculation spread further. The raiders who had attacked the colony also dismissed the humans. They had heard the stories of Earth's Deathworld origins, but they believed those stories were exaggerations. Tales told to make a young species seem dangerous. To them, humans were not monsters of survival. They were fragile newcomers, loud and emotional, but ultimately weak. When they heard that Earth might send ships, they laughed and sharpened their blades, eager to crush whatever pitiful fleet might arrive. They had no idea what was truly coming. They had no idea that Deathworlders do not fight halfway, that when they answer a call, they come with everything, with fire and steel and the determination to win or die trying. The colonists had assumed wrong. The alien factions had assumed wrong. The raiders had assumed wrong. All of them had miscalculated, because when humanity heard the cry for help, they did not hesitate. They did not weigh profit or loss. They remembered their vow, they remembered their scars, and they prepared to rise. And in that rising, the galaxy would soon learn a lesson that would echo for centuries. Never underestimate the will of Deathworlders. Within weeks, Earth became a world of preparation. The skies above the planet roared with the sound of engines as massive warships were readied for launch. Shipyards that once built explorers and traders now turned their focus to constructing and repairing warcraft. The news channels broadcast images of steel giants rising from oceanside docks and desert bases, each one bristling with weapons, each one designed to travel faster and fight harder than anything humanity had sent before. For those who watched from the ground, the sight was both terrifying and beautiful, an armada of steel preparing to cross the stars. Every corner of society felt the call. Veterans who had once sworn they would never wear a uniform again now lined up, volunteering to serve. Some were old, their bodies scarred and tired, but their eyes carried the determination of people who had lived through wars and knew the price of silence. Scientists too stepped forward. They were not soldiers, but they brought knowledge. New shields, new medical tools, new engines. Each invention making the fleet stronger. Each breakthrough turning desperation into hope. Explorers and traders also volunteered, offering their ships and their experience of navigation through the unknown. Humanity was no longer separated into groups of warriors, thinkers, and wanderers. They were united under one banner, one vow. No cry for help would go unanswered. The preparations were not easy. Humanity was not a flawless machine. Arguments broke out between leaders, some questioning the cost of sending so many ships, others fearing that the mission might invite war with alien powers. But the voices of hesitation were drowned out by the roar of the people. Ordinary citizens filled the streets in support of the mission, carrying signs, speaking on broadcasts, demanding that Earth live up to its promise. They remembered too well what it felt like to be abandoned in moments of crisis. They would not let others suffer the same fate. The politicians could argue, but the decision had already been made in the hearts of the people. The galaxy watched with disbelief. Alien observers in orbit relayed reports back to their governments, unable to explain what they were seeing. Humanity was not moving slowly, cautiously, as most civilizations did. They were moving with speed, as though hesitation itself was a sin. Fleets were formed, not of a few token ships, but of hundreds pulled from Earth's home system and beyond. Supply ships followed behind, loaded with food, medicine, and relief for the colonists. Humanity was not coming only with weapons. They were coming with everything the colony needed to survive. For the great powers of the galaxy, this was unthinkable. No empire would risk so much for strangers. No advanced species would commit so many resources without expecting something in return. To them, such action was madness. They whispered among themselves that humans were reckless, that their death-world instincts had blinded them to reason. But beneath their words of mockery was unease. The sheer scale of Earth's response frightened them. These were not small rescue ships. These were fleets of war. The armada that rose from Earth carried names that spoke of both hope and warning. Ships called Mercy, Vigilance, Iron Resolve, and Eternal Flame. Each one carried crews who had left their families behind, knowing they might never return. Yet none of them hesitated. To them, the mission was not a choice but a duty, a test of who humanity truly was. They would not fail it. As the warships thundered out of orbit, entire cities stopped to watch. Families gathered in parks and rooftops, looking up as streaks of fire crossed the night sky. Children pointed and cheered, their young minds filled with wonder that their people were strong enough to reach so far, brave enough to fight for others. Old men and women wept silently, remembering times when no one had come to help them, grateful that the new generation had chosen a different path. The Armada was not just ships. It was a promise made visible. a symbol of what humanity had become. For the crews on board, the departure was filled with emotion. Some clutched small photos of their loved ones, others carried tokens from home, tiny reminders of Earth's soil, oceans, or forests. They were heading into the unknown, but they carried their world with them. On every ship, speeches were made, not by generals or commanders, but by ordinary crew members who stood up and reminded everyone why they were there. "We do this," one said, "because no one else will. We do this because we remember. We do this because we are human." The words echoed through the halls, repeated again and again until the engines roared to life and the stars began to shift. The galaxy could not look away. Probes and satellites followed the human fleets, recording their departure. Other civilizations watched the streams in shock. They had expected hesitation, perhaps a few ships sent as a gesture. Instead, they saw overwhelming force, a unity that even the great empires could not match. For some, it was a cause of fear. If humanity could mobilize so quickly for strangers, what would they do for themselves? For others, it was a source of awe. Perhaps, they whispered, humanity was not reckless but something different, something the galaxy had never seen before. As the Armada cut through the stars, the message was clear to all. Humanity did not come halfway. They did not answer with hesitation, with excuses, or with delay. They came with everything they had, with fleets of steel, with the hearts of veterans, with the minds of scientists, and with the spirit of explorers. To the galaxy, this was unthinkable. To humanity, it was the only possible answer. When Earth's Armada finally reached the edge of the colony system, the stars ahead of them were already burning with signs of battle. From a distance, the human commanders could see flashes of light, explosions in the void where the colony's last defenses were being torn apart. The raiders had surrounded the world like wolves around a wounded prey. Their ships moved in confident formation, picking off resistance slowly, enjoying their domination. They believed themselves unchallenged, as if no one in the galaxy would dare oppose them. For weeks they had treated the colony as theirs to crush and plunder, certain that no outside power cared enough to intervene. But then, sensors screamed their arrival. Hundreds of human ships, great and small, thundered out of faster-than-light jumps. They appeared like a storm breaking across the horizon, lines of steel and fire emerging from the darkness of space. To the colonists below, trapped in shelters and bunkers, the sight was unbelievable. They had prayed for help but never dared to believe it would come. Now their skies lit up with the engines of warships larger than anything they had ever seen, painted with Earth's banners. For the first time in weeks, hope surged through their hearts. The raiders, on the other hand, were caught between shock and laughter. Shock, because they had never expected such a massive force to appear on behalf of a weak, distant colony. Laughter, because they could not believe humans were foolish enough to bring so many ships into what they thought was a hopeless battle. Death worlders, some raider captains sneered, reckless to the end. They believed they would crush these newcomers just as easily as the colony's defenses. But their confidence was a fatal mistake. The humans wasted no time. Years of conflict on Earth had taught them the value of striking fast, striking hard, and never giving the enemy a chance to recover. Commanders barked orders with calm precision, and the Armada unfolded into deadly formation. Carriers launched waves of smaller fighters, darting like angry hornets into the raider swarms. Cruisers opened fire with railguns and plasma cannons, each shot tearing holes through enemy shields. Battleships moved with slow, terrifying purpose, their massive guns firing bursts of energy that shattered entire raider vessels in a single strike. The raiders tried to respond, but they were unprepared. They had been expecting frightened colonists, not Death World-trained soldiers and war-hardened veterans. Their fleets scattered, trying to regroup, but the humans pressed their advantage without mercy. Tactics honed by centuries of Earth's own bloody history came alive in the void. Flanking maneuvers that once broke armies on ancient battlefields now broke raider squadrons. Coordinated strikes that had been perfected in wars across oceans and skies were now unleashed across the stars. Humanity's strength was not just in their weapons but in their experience, an experience carved from endless wars of survival. The battle became swift, brutal, and decisive. Explosions lit up the darkness like fireworks, painting the sky above the colony with fire. Human fighters cut through raider craft with ruthless efficiency, their pilots fearless, their machines built for speed and adaptability. Larger human ships moved together like a single living organism, covering each other, protecting their vulnerable allies, striking with terrifying precision. The raiders, used to facing disorganized victims, could not understand how to counter such unity. For every human ship lost, 5 of theirs were destroyed. For every desperate counterattack, humanity responded with overwhelming force. Within hours, the raider fleet began to collapse. Captains who had once mocked the humans now screamed in panic, ordering retreats that came too late. Their ships were picked off one by one, hunted down by relentless human pursuit. Some tried to flee into faster-than-light jumps, but human vessels had already blocked their escape routes, cutting them down before they could escape. The void that had once seemed theirs to command became a graveyard of burning wrecks. For the colonists, hidden in bunkers and shelters on the planet below, the sounds of bombardment faded into silence. When they emerged, trembling and uncertain, they saw the wreckage of raider ships falling through the sky like broken meteors, burning as they entered the atmosphere. Above them, instead of enemy banners, they saw the symbols of Earth. Their world had been saved. They cried, shouted, and prayed, overwhelmed by the miracle of survival. To them, the arrival of humanity's armada was not just military victory, it was salvation. But for the raiders who survived, it was something else entirely. It was a revelation. They had underestimated Earth. They had believed the humans to be reckless, primitive, and cautious all at once, too weak to matter, too distant to respond. What they saw instead was a species that did not hesitate, a species that moved as one, a species forged in fire. The humans fought with a will the galaxy had not expected, a will that did not falter even in the face of death. The raiders had believed themselves predators. In that battle, they realized they had been prey. Stories of the clash spread quickly. Raiders who managed to flee carried tales of the human fury, warning others never to take them lightly. The colonists sent messages of thanks across the stars, their words filled with awe and disbelief. And the human crews, though scarred and weary, stood silently in the aftermath, their ships floating among the wreckage of the enemy. They had done what they set out to do. They had answered the call. The battle above the colony was not just a rescue. It was a message carved into the void, a lesson no one could ignore. Humanity's tactics, sharpened by centuries of conflict, had shattered an enemy that thought itself untouchable. For the rescued, this was salvation, a second chance at life. For the attackers, this was revelation. Never again would they underestimate the will of Earth. News of the battle did not remain hidden for long. In a galaxy where information traveled faster than fleets, the story of what had happened at the distant colony spread like wildfire. Traders carried it in their whispers. Survivors told it with shaking voices. Even raiders who had fled the destruction could not keep silent, for their terror betrayed them. Everywhere, in marketplaces and military halls and government chambers, the words were repeated. Humanity had come, and they had come with fire. At first, many did not believe it. Some called it an exaggeration, the usual fear-mongering spread by frightened survivors. But then came the recordings. Images of Earth's armada arriving like a storm, videos of human ships carving through raider fleets, transmissions of human voices promising protection to the desperate. The evidence was undeniable. Entire networks replayed the scenes again and again, until even the most skeptical leaders could no longer dismiss it. The truth was clear. The humans had answered the cry for help, and they had answered with overwhelming force. Among ordinary people across the stars, there were whispers of awe. To them, Earth's actions were an act of mercy unlike anything they had seen from the great powers. For so long, weak colonies had been left to die, their signals ignored, their people abandoned. Yet humanity had done the unthinkable. They had sent fleets, soldiers, and supplies not for gain or conquest, but to save strangers. Some spoke of them as protectors, guardians who would not allow suffering to go unanswered. For these people, the name of Earth became a symbol of hope, but not everyone reacted with admiration. In the halls of power, where leaders measured everything in terms of strength and survival, the story inspired fear. They did not see only the mercy, they saw the power behind it. Humanity had not sent a handful of ships. They had sent an armada. They had not hesitated, argued endlessly, or delayed. They had acted swiftly, decisively, and with a unity most civilizations could not dream of achieving. For rulers who feared rivals, the sight of such power in the hands of Deathworlders was enough to make them tremble. If humans would do this for strangers, what would they do if threatened themselves? Across the galaxy, debates raged. Was humanity reckless or noble? Were they saviors or a rising threat? Some argued that Earth's actions proved they were too dangerous, that a species forged in such a harsh world could not be trusted with fleets of this size. Others countered that their mercy outweighed their might, that their willingness to risk everything for others showed a new kind of leadership the galaxy desperately needed. But regardless of the arguments, no one could deny one fact: humanity had changed the rules. The lesson was carved deeply into galactic memory. For centuries, colonies had learned to accept abandonment, to believe that a call for help was little more than a death sentence. Now everything was different. Now every desperate settlement knew that if they sent a signal into the void, someone would hear, and that someone might be Earth. But they also understood that humanity did not arrive quietly. They did not come with small promises or half-hearted gestures. They came with fleets of steel, with fire in their engines and resolve in their hearts. This became both a comfort and a warning. To those in need, it was comfort. The Deathworlders would answer, and survival was possible. To those who preyed on the weak, it was a warning. To attack a helpless colony was to risk summoning a storm unlike anything they had faced before. Raiders, pirates, and warlords whispered nervously, their arrogance shaken. They had thought the humans weak, but now they looked over their shoulders, fearing that the next cry for help might bring Earth's armada crashing down on them. The galaxy began to change in small ways. Colonies that once hid in silence now dared to send their signals, hoping Earth might hear. Some civilizations adjusted their strategies, suddenly cautious not to provoke the Deathworlders. And in the stories told in quiet places, among children, traders, and wanderers, the tale grew larger than life. Humanity was no longer just another species. They had become a symbol, a living reminder that mercy and power could walk hand in hand. The miscalculation that had begun with a desperate colony's signal was now etched into history. Alien factions had believed humans too distant, too primitive, too cautious. They had believed Earth would not risk itself for strangers. But they had been wrong. The truth was now undeniable. When humanity arrived, they did not come in half measures. They came with everything, heart, fire, and steel. And the galaxy would never forget it.